morning, good afternoon, wherever you are. Thank you for joining us today and welcome to today's Digital Learning Exchange session, which is sponsored by Lenovo. Today, we will be exploring some of the new opportunities for education technologies within remote learning. I'm really grateful to you for joining us today, and I'm Sarah Marshall. I'm Global Head of Content for Bett. Bett is the world's largest education community. And here at Bett, we believe in creating a better future by transforming education. Our mission is to bring together people, ideas, practices, and technologies so that educators and learners can fulfill their potential. The past few months have seen education transform more quickly than we could ever have dreamed. Schools, universities, teachers, and students have jumped quickly into what in many cases have been new systems, methods, and environments. As we reflect on our experiences, schools start to open up and we move into a new phase of the pandemic. It's time to start to look to the future and put in place a structured digital strategy that ensures equal access, prepares our future workforce, and considers parents and students alike. So today, I'm really honoured to bring you an expert group of educators and researchers who've been looking at exactly these questions. First, we will hear from Gerald Wang, who's Head of Public Sector for Government and Health Insights at IDB Asia Pacific. We will then discuss these findings with Dr. Wagi Shukri bin Hassan, who's Deputy Director for Learning Platforms at the Ministry of Education in Malaysia. We'll also hear from Mr. Koo Hung Tran, who's Director for Education, Transformation and Development at Lenovo Central Asia Pacific. Then we will have a demonstration of Lenovo's distance learning platform, which has been supporting so many schools and universities through this transition. Throughout the session, we welcome your involvement through the question and answer function and through the chat function. Please do send us your questions and we will do our best to answer them. But for now, let me hand you over to Gerald, who's going to share some headline insights.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sarah. Let me share my deck now. A minute. Okay. All right. So can everyone see my slides now?
It's just loading. Yes, right. Here we go.
Well, welcome to the new normal, I guess. It's all online conferences now. I wish I could meet everyone here in person and speak to you one-on-one. However, of course, with the COVID-19 pandemic, many of us are actually working from proxy. And I think this is definitely one of the new focus areas where we're seeing a lot of transformations happening, that's beyond the institutional grounds. It's happening in our homes, it's happening in our home offices and communities. So it's quite interesting. And this is what leads me to, my title for today, which is really the Great Reset for EduTech. And that, how are we actually seeing the changes that are happening in this space? How are, some of the examples that we're seeing across the world occur? So for those of you who have not met me, I am Gerald Wang. I am Head of Public Sector for the Asia Pac region. I lead education worldwide in IDC itself also. And I just want to share this comic, which I love a lot, by Tom Fishman. COVID-19 is not a change agent, but it's a digital accelerant. And why is it a digital accelerant? Because, look at the left picture that you see down there. I'm sure many of that conversation that you see in that thought bubble there has occurred to many of us in the last 5 years and the last decade in board meetings, where somehow IT, the CIOs, we don't have a very large voice, right? And many of the transformation, many of the funding actually come from the line of business decision makers. Now, of course, with the whole COVID impact, we're starting to see, people really rethinking about how do they deliver, learning through digital, right? Because that's the only way right now for us to get our students engaged, to get everyone communicating, to get everyone learning. And that's definitely what we're seeing happen. And as we spoke, and with many of our different public sector end users, as well as within the education space, whether it's from the K-12 landscape to the tertiary to the professional learning space, this change is happening so rapidly that because many of them were resting on their laurels for a very long time, right? They always said things like massive, open online courses were not going to impact the way they deliver services and all. But, with COVID, apparently, this pace of change is really accelerating a lot in the last couple of months. Now, when we did a lot of focus group discussions with different folks within educators within this space, we started to capture a lot of these conversations. And you can see down here, just within I think the APAC region itself, we've had about 20 million students that were could not continue could not go to schools because their countries, their cities, their towns all got all had a lockdown earlier in the year during I guess February to April period, where we started to see pockets of explosion of cases happening across the Asian Pac. And then now we're starting to see second waves happening in certain cities, like in Korea or in Melbourne in Australia. So it's really interesting, how everyone's really rushing right into digital to be able to ensure that learning still continues within the digital space. Now, if you look across all these different comments that you see down here, many of them are still very much focused around accessibility piece. So creating digital accessibility to content, digital accessibility to your educators, to your teachers, to your lecturers, to your tutors. This is where we are starting to see a lot of them, going through the pain point of digitization. Now, right now, when we talk about digital transformation across all the other verticals, whether it's mining, manufacturing, and, public sector space, we look at what we call digitalization, which is in fact it's not just digitizing your what you're doing on a day-to-day basis, right? It's about rethinking, rejigging the way you go about delivering education and learning. And this is what we're seeing in the landscape today. Now, in IDC, we have talked about this 5 stages to recovery curve for, I think, since March this year. And, every time there is a pandemic or it's always linked to an economic situation. So you do see this U-shaped wave that happens, right? And, when we poll many of the education institutions across the Asia-Pac region, in IDC, we actually have this survey that runs every 2-3 weeks. And this is the Wave 10 results that was dated back in 20th August. You can see that many of the educators, education institutions, whether in K-12 or tertiary, have already gone, to this whole return to growth, embracing that it's normal. Remember, in the first few months when it happened in, I think, March, April period, there was this scramble, right, to get your IT resources, to make sure that we have computer screens, we need to update our broadband plans at home, and then we started to have broadband wars between parents who need to do video conferencing with their colleagues, and then the kids themselves needs to have one-on-one time, attend lectures online, with their teachers, and also it was very interesting dynamics. But I think in at least the last 3-4 months, we've managed to kind of work through the different kinks in terms of what works and what doesn't work. And I think everyone now has built up a sort of a resilience in that we understand, what is, next step, what do we need to do if and when we, touch wood, but, if we do have a second wave or there is another disaster that does happen. And that is where you build a certain resilience. And that is where within IDC, we're saying that if you manage to go through that pain, you have really done that first step to be able to flatten the curve in that the economic impact is not as great. That's what we're seeing happen across all industries today. Now, when we spoke to many education institutions, there are new outcomes that, at the overarching layer that we're trying to look at. Right? So firstly was, as I mentioned, creating that internal resiliency, the ability to deliver, mixed delivery, hybrid kinds of learning platforms, learning solutions, right? Whether it's on-prem or whether it is virtual, right? So I think that's something we're starting to see happen. There are some countries where kids actually do return back to school, like Taiwan, in Singapore, where they, because of the low local community cases, this is where we're starting to see, a lot more, return to the normal. However, they are and they have also established, a lot of digital capabilities. So as and when there is a need to go back to the digital space, these places are being in a way ready, right? So, and it's going to be more communal focus, right? Because we're starting to realize learning, especially at the K-12 levels, it is not just the teachers alone. You need to involve your parents, your caregivers. You need to enable students to be able to reach out to their peers, to communicate, to collaborate, and that means a lot of rethinking and resetting the way we deliver education, right? So I have many friends in this, in universities in Hong Kong, in Singapore, in Australia, who are teaching courses, and they said that because of the whole lockdown, the whole campuses have gone virtual, right? And the funny part was that many of them feel that they no longer feel like teachers or lecturers anymore because they feel they are more influencers these days because they're constantly creating a lot of content to really teach the students and keep them engaged, right? So that has come to it was great within I think the third and the fourth month, but right now we're starting to also see a lot of cases of what we call digital fatigue within the ecosystem itself. So people are getting tired. The engagement with the learning content online and all that is not as great as when it first started out, right? Because it was when it first started, it was fresh, it was new, it was something interesting. People were trying to get into the various different learning platforms to be able to get access, right? So right now, as things settle down to the new normal, I think we need to really think about what the next level of engagements, whether it's through gamifications, whether it's through AR, VR technologies, whether it is through understanding what exactly takes, what exactly helps with the acquisition, the retention of students. I think that's something that we definitely need to look into. All right. So when we look across the different functions, whether it is a K-12 or a tertiary landscape, whether you're public or private also, there are certain similarities in terms of education related services that we are starting to see, that are being procured right now. Right. So when we look at the different tenders that are coming out, I think the first key thing, as you can see on the right side, is really focusing around how do you transform your learning acquisition and retention. I think that whole engagement piece is a very, very big area. And it's so the way they tender for that is also very different in from a technology point of view. We are so used as CIOs, right, or IT directors. We're so used to talk with the technical talk, right? How much ports and switches, software, and all that. But now the tenders are coming out from the point of view of outcomes, right? So if you can improve my student, experience by 20%, maybe that's your first payment milestone. So how do you write for tenders that way, right? How do you, change the way you go about doing things? I think that is something that we're starting to see evolve a bit within the education space. Virtual campuses, this is quite a norm right now, definitely for the whole safe distancing requirements that you're seeing in the landscape. We're starting to see many governments across different verticals that are actually really focusing on improving the skill sets of your local citizens, right? So we're seeing a lot of funding around skills, certification, retraining at this point in time within this space. And if you're within the tertiary landscape of lifelong learning, institutions that's capturing this market, I think this is a very big time right now to be able to put out all these kind of training content, all these kinds of I guess data points that can really help address this gap within the market, right? And then as we go down the different layers within the piece, you can see how it actually impacts the education vertical as a whole, depending on which part of the curve of the pandemic are you actually at. Okay. Now, so what exactly are the first steps for education resilience? Typically, whenever I do a lot of closed-door change management, strategy planning sessions, I really, sit down with every one of the educators to talk about these three main points. The first one is really very much around digital accessibility, right? Having access to computing devices, collaboration, productivity suites, and tools, and then also having the skills to be able to use them. I think those are some of the key things that we definitely need to put in place. Now, from a teaching point of view, because right now there are a lot of countries where we've seen stimulus monies coming down into the schools. So in the past, stimulus monies in the past crisis, in the other crises, whether it's the SARS pandemic or the avian flu pandemic, and as well as economic crisis, we've always seen central national governments actually, giving funding through tax rebates to large corporations and hope that it trickles down into the local economy. Now, this COVID impact, the way the stimulus budgets are being shaped out in the last couple of months, we notice that it actually goes direct to the local businesses as well as the local communities and individuals, right? So suddenly you have a lot of non-IT folks who have money to procure for IT, but there's so much overwhelming, options that are out there in the market. And these folks, again, as I said, they talk about outcomes. They don't talk about the technical capabilities of things. So how do you actually address that? And where we're seeing some interesting, happenings across the Asia Pac regions is when, national governments or state governments actually coming together to create centralized marketplaces where certain solutions are actually being accredited to work for certain specific reasons. And then from there, these end users actually just buy off the central marketplace. Excuse me. Okay, so the next really focus is, and different part of the conversation that we're starting to see is really growing this whole automation piece, right? So how do you automate personalized learning? How do you integrate student life cycle administrative systems from admissions to graduation? What is that whole student life cycle? How do they create very unique services that actually help the child realize their full potential? I think that is something where we're starting to see new areas of leveraging technologies like AI, creating digital twins for every different student profile so that they can create very personalized kind of push down services for each and every one of the students. I think that's where we're starting to see some layers of automation with regards to the curriculum management systems, with regards to the learning management systems, or the administrative systems. And then at the back of it all, also at the end of the day, don't forget that when you go digital, there is bound to be a lot of security issues. Trust me, we've seen a lot of ransomware attacks happening across multiple universities. Recently, the university in Utah just spent almost about $400,000 just to pay up the ransom for that to ensure that the campus services actually continue. So this is something that we're starting to see security becoming a very big part of the conversation. And last but not least is really about thinking about how do you create more new experiences? How do you create more intuitive, interactions with the students and the learners? And I did mention earlier there is a digital fatigue that is ongoing, and really looking around the wellness piece is going to be a very big area. Whether it's physical, mental, psychological, this is something that we need to address now. And I'm not just talking about the students, I'm also talking about the teachers as well as the parents and caregivers. How do you provide the resources for them? Now, when you match the different kind of technologies to these different areas, so in terms of accessibility, we're starting to see a lot of spending in the tablets and the networking equipment, right? And in terms of automation, we're seeing that many of the tenders are actually calling for a lot of IT managed services. They're moving to the cloud with SaaS. They're leveraging more AI technologies to really create those insights, those personalized services. But in terms of new experiences, that whole digital trust piece on security, as well as new experiences through VR, we're starting to see that occur quite rapidly. So I'm just going to leave you with these three main points for today. So to kick off our Q&A in a bit, and that go about change management, it's not just about investing in the technology. Technology at the end of the day is a tool, right? So the first key thing that you need to put in place is really have a clear roadmap, right? So about where you are today, where you want to go, and how are you going to get there according to time-stamped milestones, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years down the road. And when you go about investing in these technologies, make sure you design by agility, right? So I think having that agile mindset where you can scale up and scale down depending on needs, I think that is the way to go forward, to deal with the situation that the context that we are currently living into. Right. And last but not least, at the end of the day, we do know that silos exist like crazy in many institutions out there, especially at the tertiary level. And at the end of the day, it's really about a collaborative approach, really understanding and working together between the IT and the non-IT decision makers to really ensure that all outcomes that are there are met with each and every one of the technology investments. All right. Now, with that, thank you so much for your time. I'm going to pass the time back to Sarah.
Wonderful. Thank you, Gerald. So what we will do now is just going to stop the screen share there and bring the audience back in. Please do. I can see some great questions already coming through the Q&A, which is fantastic. Thank you. Please do take a look at those and upvote the ones you'd like to have answered. But for now, I'd just like to introduce our panelists once again. In fact, I'll ask them to introduce themselves very quickly. Mr. Koo and Dr. Wagi, Dr. Shukri, would you mind just introducing yourselves very briefly, and then we'll start with some questions. Oh, I can't. Hold on, Mr. Koo, we're just struggling with your sound there.
Sorry. I'm Mr. Koo. I'm from Lenovo. I'm actually taking care of the educations for Central Asia Pacific, which cover ASEAN and Hong Kong, Taiwan, and Korea. My role is basically to help customer on their, I would say, the education transformations, to talk to them how can we basically help you to achieve the teaching and learning outcome that you aspire within your school or your environment itself. Okay, that's a snapshot of what I'm doing.
Thank you very much. And Dr. Shukri.
Hi, everyone. My name is Shukri. I'm a Deputy Director of Learning Platforms at the Ministry of Education in Malaysia. Basically, my work involves developing platforms, applications, services, and content for teaching and for teachers and students for all our schools in Malaysia, in a nutshell.
Fantastic. So we've got some really interesting insights coming from very different perspectives. My first question, it's such a roadmap for the future, what Gerald has shared with us. So I suppose my first very broad question is, what key steps do we need to take now to achieve this next normal?
Do you want me to go first? Okay, so I think for me in my deck, very quickly, it was really again on the 3 points: access, automate, and create an experience piece. Right. I think around accessibility piece, this one is still a very big issue. I mean, we've been talking about digital accessibility and equity for the longest time, and we still do have many children within, especially around rural regions within countries, that do not have access to broadband connectivity, do not have access to your devices and all that. And this is something that we definitely need to work through and think about. How do we actually get them to these kids? And then the next one is really around the automation piece, on how do you really drive better, streamline ways of going about doing the education, operations, and business. And I think that is something that we really need to rethink through. I gave you an example just now where many of my lecturer friends are, creating videos and content. And then I realized that, we did sit back and think that, does every teacher have to create a video? Couldn't maybe the head of department do that? And the different teachers focus on the one-to-one teaching when they're in an online space. Right? So there are many ways on resourcing, realigning the way we use our existing resources that we need to think through. And then last but not least is really around that whole experience, right? So what are the new ways that you have to do to continually keep, your kids engaged? I think that's one of the toughest things I'm sure Dr. Shukri has to, deal with that a lot, with creating all this new content, fresh content on a constant basis. So.
Right. Actually, just before I start, talk a little bit about Dilemma, which is our digital educational learning initiative Malaysia. So basically, on the 1st of July last year, we started a new journey in terms of digital learning. And what we did was to democratize online learning here in Malaysia by providing every teacher and every student an ID to log in and learn. So I guess when the pandemic happened, we were lucky to have a platform so that the teachers and students could leverage on. So in a sense, yeah, Malaysia had a better way of coping with the pandemic. On Delima itself, we have a number of applications, services, and resources. And like you say, in terms of the platform itself, access to it, it's basically 99.99% available. And it's able to scale to whatever numbers that is required. So basically right now we have 5.3 million IDs covering both teachers and students, and it's growing every month. For us, what's important is how do we encourage engagement and participation in online learning spaces. So that's the difficulty. So for us, I see it in a way that we need to have partnerships with other agencies, whether it's government or non-governmental agencies, to help us with content. So we work, for example, with the National Library to get books, and we work with UN agencies like UNICEF to get content to support our teachers during the pandemic. And unlike the previous implementation, what we decided at the ministry is not to have forced adoption. So for us, it's a softly approach with the teachers and students. And having said that, during the start of pandemic, we had about 800,000 sort of users logging in. So we've now reached 3.2 million. And if you think about that, that's a bit scary. And at the peak, we had about 800,000 active users on our platform. So it means that our teachers are able to do this if, of course, they have the access and the devices to support them to have their own learning. And for us also, it's very important that we consider the poorest of the poor, whether they can access the platform. So I guess what I'm saying is that we should have a better approach and strategy in terms of getting participation in these sorts of groups. I think the UN calls them, they use deprivation variables, so that whilst calculating any sort of groups that are marginalized or cannot access, we sort of run right now looking at the data very carefully to see where the focus should be and what sort of leverage we can focus on to get people like this on board. So the onboarding itself is very important. So for Delima, we also use a number of AI programs and automation and a lot of stuff that's on the back end that you don't see. Like, for example, onboarding, transfers, and offboarding. It's very technical, but for us, it's something that we have to do. If you think about 5.3 million IDs and teachers transferring and students transferring, then you get a headache. So those sorts of things we have used our AI to do. And of course, one last thing for us at Delima is that we've built dashboards to look at every segment of data to do with teaching and learning. Yeah. So we're looking at how do teachers actually log in and then start using the online classrooms for teaching and learning. How do the students, what sort of devices did they use? So those sorts of questions are always in our minds, and trying to figure out best ways of doing those sorts of things. Yeah. So in terms of hybrid learning, one of the key things that we learned during the pandemic is hybrid learning is now kind of what the teachers do. They don't only use the online platforms, but they also use other communicative technologies to supplement the communication. So communication is now an important element between the teacher and the student, and the teacher and the parent. So it also means the types of learning has also evolved, and therefore then the types of assessment have also needed to evolve. So those sorts of changes are interesting to me, and we're still learning from what is going to happen. So for us, it's like what are emerging, what sort of trends are coming out. So for us, that's where we are looking at.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much. Mr. Koo, would you like to take this one also?
Okay, I will see that. I think during the pandemic period, I speak to a lot of the educators. I think one of the things that they are talking about is previously they put a lot of focus, basically investment on the structures. Now they are moving a lot of the investment into the, I would say, the digital platform. It become one of the crucial platform that to enable everything for the student to continue their teaching and learning within the environment itself. Okay, I think during this short time frame, actually, a lot of teachers or the student actually exposed to the collaborative platform. Basically, I never see such a, I would say, the speed of adoptions we have in that environment by using the platform to continue the learning. I think one of the challenges is, I would say, is what we do is previously is like a lot of things that we move from the, I would say, the traditional learning, but we just port it over to the online learning environment itself. I think a lot of the school and the teachers itself having a lot of challenges, like what Gerald mentioned just now, to drive the student engagement. How do we do that? Previously we have been teaching the student face-to-face. I think the approach somehow when we move it to online, the approach need to change, but somehow they still continue with the old way of teaching. I think that's one of the challenges. A lot of the, I would say, the educator talk about how can we effectively to basically to drive the outcome that they wanted when we do it face to face to the student. I think this is one of the key discussion and things that we need to look at. What's the changes, what's the transformation we need when we move our teaching from the very traditional to the digital learning itself. Definitely, there's a lot of things that we need to take into consideration, not just for the student, even for the teachers itself. Okay, I think this is something that we need to look at moving forward. How do we make it much more effective and in driving the student engagement and to drive the learning outcome that we wanted in the environments.
Yeah. So we've talked a lot about the psychological side almost of the changing mindset, but just taking it back one step, what sort of framework should a school really think about? And I think this is probably for you, Mr. Koo, to talk about how to get the best out of technology for students and teachers alike.
I wouldn't say it's so much the best out of technologies. I think in the framework, it doesn't change a lot. It's just the approach that we're going to teach need to change a bit. I think the pedagogy, all these things need to change when we are moving from the, I would say, from the traditional to the digital learning itself. Okay, this is something that need to take into consideration. I think previously, I think the world might end up combining the aspect of traditional and digital learning to a certain extent. I think during this period, is that any term I would say a lot, I would say educator more aware on assumption of what about the digital, I would say, learning platform. Okay, what's the experience when they're teaching online? Okay, that are some of the things that we need to take into considerations and to evaluate how do we want to do it moving forward. Okay, definitely there's a lot of, I would say, approach or they need to have certain tools to come together in order for them to teach effectively when they do it online versus the traditional approach itself. All these things need to take into consideration, which I would say during the COVID, all these things was not planned accordingly, and actually they just move everything to the online platform. The challenges they have is like basically a lot of things like simple things like the lecturer asked me to. Previously, I like to use the whiteboard to write and teach to the student, but today I cannot do it digitally. But actually, you can do it if you have the right tools. All these things we need to put into consideration as we move forward as a simple thing like that. I thought that is something that how do we create a more engaging virtual classroom as we teach virtually to the student itself and to have to drive the engagement we wanted, and besides that, how do we assess a student and to get the student attention accordingly. Okay, this will be a continued things that I think we need to take into consideration as we move to a digital learning environment.
Thank you. If I may, there's a question around younger students, and I feel like it sort of comes into your sort of a more engaging virtual classroom is when you have a younger learner, how do you ensure younger learners who aren't yet reading and typing properly, how can we help them with their access?
Okay, I think
that's a question from Hakan Bass. So thank you for that.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Maybe I just for younger students, I think for the teachers need to have the tools to a certain extent to manage the virtual classroom to a certain extent. A lot of the teachers lack of resources and during the period of time, like they don't have a classroom management platform, okay, to manage the student device, to manage the content, to make sure what type of content to push down to the screen, to manage the screen so that students don't move away from the class, that means to lock down the screen, to basically to have the Q&A, quizzes, all these things running and so on. All these things need to be automated from the teacher front to a certain extent. This is like sort of like something like the smart classroom platform that we're having today, basically for the teachers to manage a classroom digitally. I think this is going to be very critical.
Okay, thank you. That's really helpful. Thank you. A question for everybody, and that comes back to Gerald's presentation. The reality is we are in many cases across the world looking at smaller budgets to spend on everything, but also to spend on education. So if you have a smaller budget for education, where should you be prioritizing your investment? What are the key things to be looking for?
Interesting question. I think where we are seeing a lot of prioritization right now is really on students who are in school leaving years. So, moving from primary school to secondary school or secondary school to a tertiary institution. That's where we're seeing, more focus and developments at this point in time. Of course, looking at budgets also, especially at the tertiary space, we're starting to see, I saw one of the questions where they talk about, micro, qualifications and all that. We do see a lot of, tertiary level institutions actually going about doing that. Because right now, I think the mindsets these days of kids that are coming out into the market is that sometimes a 3-year or 4-year degree program may not necessarily be the best option for them in terms of the career choice, right? So sometimes you could go for a 2 months boot camp in programming and you come out a programmer, for certain companies, tech startups and all that. And it really depends on, what the context is and, how do we go about it. And definitely we do see, some changes within this space.
Thank you. Who else? Dr. Shukri, I think you would like to go?
So let me just answer a few questions, the previous questions as well. I think one of the things that teachers are aware of is that if during the pandemic is that the types of approaches they used to use in the classroom are kind of difficult to transfer in terms of the online environment. And I think one of the things that I get asked on a lot is that the idea of equivalency, whether 1 hour of teaching and learning in the classroom equates to 1 hour of teaching and learning if it's done in the house during the pandemic. So I think a lot of mindsets needs to change in terms of what we look at, because if you remember, McLuhan says the medium is a message. So different mediums have different ways of looking at how learning can occur. And one of the things that we realized during the pandemic as well is that teachers needed to be trained, because teachers came in without the background of doing online learning. So at the ministry, we set up almost every day for a month and a half webinars, how to teach teachers how to do online learning. So that was our strategy during the pandemic. For us, certification for teachers then becomes important, because It means that teachers can be certified digitally online on the platform for them to say these teachers are now able to do A, B, C, D, E. And we are not just talking about Malaysian standards, but standards which are international, maybe from the ISTE or from the UN. So certification becomes important, and things like badges and micro certs become key in encouraging teachers to participate in webinars and such. And professional development too will then have to then evolve, because we're so used to face that when you do it online, they go, this is different. How do I do it? What do I learn actually? So those sorts of questions need to be addressed when you do online professional development for teachers. And for us at Dilemma, next year, we will start looking at other groups to certify, and also to build, I guess, new learning pathways for not only for teachers, but for students. For example, as you say, if a child wants to do STEM and programming, and there is a curriculum, but what do we do if you want to do more? That's the question. You want to do things like Python, but you're in year 6 in school. How do I get access to new content? So those sorts of things too, we need to think about and maybe rethink and reframe in terms of providing content and services for students for the future. I think that's one thing that I would say.
Yeah, thank you. And actually, if there's a couple of questions sort of building on that, there are a couple of questions in the Q&A that sort of refer to the micro qualifications, micro certification there, but also slightly stepping back into curriculum design and actually what should our young people be learning. We're in an I guess that's changing dramatically. So building on that, Mr. Koo, if I may, to begin with, have you, with the schools and the colleges that you work with, what are your experiences of how the curriculum is changing?
The curriculum is different. You mean in terms of curriculum, what the new young people going to study on?
Yes. What I suppose, but Dr. Shukri says the children who want to learn something different, and with the new technology, with the new platforms, they can. But what should they be learning as well? So I just said, how are things changing?
Okay, then currently, I think with the current digital transformations, I think a lot of people talk about the skill set, or the student when they study after the college, maybe the job. The courses they're pursuing, the job no longer there to a certain extent. I think due to automations, due to, I would say, robots. That type of situation, that's actually happening now, because we are seeing the skill set, actually the lifespan of the skill set getting shorter and shorter. People actually go for lifelong learning standpoint. I think for the I would say the young I would say people study in university or this thing, I think certain skills that we need to build on rather than just on the subject matter expert. I think things like collaborations, things like creativity, it become much more critical as we move forward to the, I would say, the future workplace in future. I think this become much more critical as we progress to the new era. Okay, we don't actually know what is the new job available. Like just now, Gerald also mentioned about the lifelong learning. I think become very crucial. Short-term courses will basically enhance their skill as they progress into the new environment. So I think this is going to be things that continue to happen, and we need to be aware about it.
Yeah, may I add on that? So I think before they go into their tertiary specialization into different areas, whether it's business, accountancy, engineers, or life science researchers and all that. I think there is a foundational level that we definitely need to think and build up at the K-12 levels, and this set of skills does also have to tie into your digital skills, right? And when I talk about digital skills, I'm not talking about the technical stuff like network management, programming, and all that. I'm not talking about that. I'm just talking about very generic digital skills around understanding things like information literacy, right? Understanding like how do you manage data, data governance, data ownership, data trust, data stewardship, and all that. Understanding what's media literacy, how do you differentiate fact from fiction with a lot of fake news as we call it out there. How do we manage all of that? Understanding the basic premises of being online and securing yourself, two-factor authentications, going through biometrics, like understanding that very basic level. And as Ku mentioned, how do they collaborate that in the digital space, right? So I think that's where it's very critical, so that when they go into their different specializations, they don't just say that I'm an accountant, I'm an engineer. They can actually say that I'm a digital accountant, I'm a digital engineer, I'm a digital HR person, I'm a digital comms person. So it's really how digital is really being embedded in every different profession now. It's very critical. Part of the skill sets that you need to build at that foundational level.
And I think also that you've both come into the thing that we need to look into for the future. For example, here in Delima itself, what we're looking at in terms of data and the metrics, the types of management for the future is to look at collaboration and all the 4 C's, creativity, and we can measure that digitally as well with a platform. Without a platform, you can't do this. You need to do a survey and find out. But with a platform, you can actually measure bit by bit how this transformation is, the journey is moving forward. So we're lucky we have all that. And going back to what you said, I mean, things like news literacy, all these sort of new multi-literacies are also important. And we at the Lenovo also are very aware that cybersecurity, all these new ways of looking in terms of digital data are all being done, but that's outside the construct of the curriculum. So we are trying to support the idea of being digital, but having the flexibility within the platform to provide these sorts of things. So hopefully, yeah.
Thank you. Great. I'd just like to go back to sort of Gerald's presentation and some of the essential guidance that we talked about. So we speak about learning management, and I suppose a question for the group, which we're sort of talking about, but we're thinking to the future. But right now, what does learning management look like in practice? Gerald, maybe I can start with you, as it's from your research.
Learning management to me comes in many different areas, right? So whether it's from the curriculum management, whether it's from the student administrative piece and all that, and where we're starting to see a lot of new initiatives that's occurring right now is they're looking at the entire life cycle of every single different student because of the digital data that they're actually collecting. So, understanding, what their strengths, their weaknesses from the learning platform, and as well as, marrying that with a lot of their administrative details, right? So, financial background, health background, and all that. And how do institutions actually create this whole personalized kind of push services down from, admissions to graduation throughout that life cycle? And so at different points, so instead of the student, actually going to pull down services, it's actually being pushed down to the different individual students. That's where we start to see a lot of interesting innovations and new ways of doing, I guess, the business of running schools. But I also do like to caution that it's still very much in the nascent development at this point. A lot of it, you need to train your AI systems. And AI right now also does face an issue because the pre-COVID mindset data sets they use to train AI is different from the post-COVID data sets. So there's a lot of thinking, and there's a lot of ethical related kinds of questions on how do you go about using the data, how it's being leveraged, who have access to it, who manages it, who controls where the data flows and all that. That needs to be thought through very carefully because we do have national laws like GDPR, PDPA that we need to be compliant to. So it's not an easy way to go about that, but we're definitely seeing some interesting transformation on that whole student journey
Thank you. Mr. Koo or Dr. Shukri, would you like to speak about this as well?
For us, I think learning management is about analytics, because what's important, as Gerald has said, is personalized learning. And personalized learning can only be built if we have proper digital profiles and portfolios of learning. So personalized learning then would move on to learning pathways. So these sorts of things we've started to look at and started to build with AIs and machine learning as well. But I guess what I'm saying is that the previous understanding is of learning management, I think, is different than maybe our interpretation of learning management. Because when we think about learning management, we think about systems. Whilst in Dilemma, we think about learning management in terms of what is our end game? What do we need to do to reach that? And that's a journey for us. And building profiles and portfolios means that the analytics engine needs to be quite robust and well designed, looking at metrics that matters, not just looking at the whole data and not looking at the details, not just the big data, but the small data as well. So understanding and the algorithms and the frameworks and the models that go into it oftentimes escape a lot of people. So for us, looking at the details is as important as looking at the whole.
Thank you. That's really helpful. Thank you. Mr. Koo, would you like to include?
Okay, definitely I agree with Dr. Sui. I think learning management, become much more important. I think the student life cycle management, you need to understand how from the enrollment, like admissions, up to they finish a course, how are they doing after that? I think this become something that I think a lot of the universities is looking at, basically to have more robust system, basically to have a look at the end-to-end. Like what we previously is very silo. The student information system, all these things is very much for just record standpoint. You don't actually use information to evaluate students, how are they performing, how their application done. Because as Dr. Squid mentioned earlier, also the personal learning was the next part that I think most of the school is driving, basically to drive more student engagement. I think this become much more critical because the learning is very much centered toward the learner. They actually need to take more responsibility on how they learn, how they progress, all these things. I think this become one of the critical area, that something that we should look at moving forward.
Thank you. Okay, that's great. Thank you. If I may, I'd like to take a question from the Q&A from the chat around. We've spoken about accessibility and reference young people, or sort of very younger learners, but a number of attendees to this session are asking about accessibility for students with disabilities or special educational needs. So would you be able to share your thoughts about best practice and what you've seen work across various settings to help people watching, please?
Sure. I think it's a very interesting space. I mean, when we talk about digital equity and accessibility, it's definitely pre-COVID. It was really talking about that space where we have students with certain learning, disabilities. Where, like, for me, I'm dyslexic and I didn't know till I was 40. And then we've had students who are physically disabled are able to travel to schools on a day-to-day basis, and especially during certain months like winter months and all that, which does have some issues in terms of getting access to that. I think the whole pandemic situation where we have accelerated, as in IDC calls it, 2 years of digital transformation in 2 months. We've really kind of worked through certain kinks with how we go about delivering digital learning, and that's definitely one of the few best practices and learning points that many students within this space can definitely take up. I know that a lot of the learning also does come in terms of how do we digitalize that whole experiential learning piece, right? So for your pre-K-12s, for students with disabilities and all that. We're starting to see a lot of very interesting content leveraging technologies like AR, VR, where they can actually engage with an environment, and even in STEM, kind of situations, especially for science labs, engineering, machinery and all that. We're starting to see, these kinds of AR, VR solutions that are actually being created so that even if they aren't on site or on-prem within school premises to actually go through that whole learning process, they can actually learn it online. It's not a direct, I would say, replacement of the real thing, but it would definitely, give someone the ability to understand what are how things work, how do they interact with the physical space. So that's where we're starting to see layers of investments. Yep.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. For us at Delima, we are lucky that our platform is able to be to offer special educational needs in terms of accessibility digitally, and we use things like AI for a number of things in terms of engaging with that sector. For us, I guess what's interesting with our experience is that parental involvement and engagement is important, especially with special education, and that's where the conversations actually occur. So providing a platform that both the parents, the therapists, or the teachers, and the child can have those conversations are very important. So, for example, if you provide a platform that the parents and the therapists can get together and discuss issues, because in the pandemic, they couldn't go to the therapists and do things. So by having a platform, then they could do that. And I think that should be our focus in the short term. And in the future, I think build better ways to have these sorts of conversations online. I myself, I'm actually dyslexic. So for me, it's like very important to have those sorts of conversations. So, and currently we are looking at developing specific technologies for specific special education needs. So for us in this next 3-4 months, we're looking at how do we do this and what should be our focus. So yeah, it's always a ongoing and dynamic journey for us, because every time something emerges for us, okay, we should be doing this, and we only have limited time, but yeah, for us it's very interesting and challenging. And moving forward, I think, as I said, the focus should be on having those conversations.
The collaboration point is a key one, isn't it, between homeschool and everybody. Mr. Koo.
Yeah, definitely. Like just now you talk about, I would say technologies definitely help to, I would say, to drive inclusions. I think for some, it helped for certain students that they have, I would say, like dyslexic students. Basically, they're having issue of reading all these things. Definitely, technologies come with the tools that basically help them, like something like, give an example, Microsoft, the immersive readers can help them on readings, all these things. I think that definitely we have tools. Even we can teach them through video, audio. We can actually leverage on different type of platform in order to, I would say, to improve or drive the effectiveness on the teaching itself or learning for the student itself. I think all these tools will help to facilitate and to drive, I would say, more engaging learning for the student itself. Okay, I think moving forward, even some of the school looking at device like AR, VR in order to drive more immersive learning experience, especially for those vocational school students that need to look at how I would say the machine work. I think this is going to be one of the platforms that a school will continue to explore, basically to drive inclusions within their learning environment itself.
Thank you. We have another question from the attendees, and it's around, it goes back to engagement. And actually the consequences or lack of, if students don't engage, the sort of perhaps the implications of not completing work and what that means for them, but actually what power the educators may have. So I'd love to get your experiences of this.
So I can give a Singapore example in that. So it's not, as I think Dr. Shukri mentioned very rightly just now, especially the K-12 levels. The teaching it's not just between the teachers and the students. The parents actually do play a very big part within the education space. And now everyone's at home locked up with our kids, and then, we're thinking about how do we help them get, some of us, I think I remember when the COVID first started, many of my friends with schooling kids had to try to get their kids on the online platform, and then when they finally did, the platform crashed, and there's a lot of like kinks that we all needed to work through and all that. And one thing was very interesting with the Singapore example, that they had what they call the Parents Gate, whereby all the students progress their day-to-day interactions with teachers, their day-to-day assignment, their test marks, scores, and all that are all recorded on those portals. And parents can actually have access to it, see how their children are doing, and really make sure that the children are compliant to whichever learning outcomes or assignments that the teachers have sent to them. And I think that's definitely parents or caregivers. I think that's definitely one of the big areas that I haven't seen any other Asia-Pac countries really really putting in place that, and it's great because with that portal also you have a lot of resources to help these out of classroom kind of teaching with the parents. You give them resources, you help them with you teach them how to teach from home. You also help them from a point of view of I talked about the wellness piece earlier also, right? So their psychological wellness, their mental wellness, and how do you cope with a kid that's not learning as well as they should. And then, how do you assign certain, lessons? How do you go about solving certain, problems? I think those kinds of engagements are definitely very critical that we need to start building up right
now. Thank you. Dr. Shukri, is there anything else you'd like to add about engagement?
Right. I guess for me, in my experiences, when teachers and students talk about learning online, you tend to think about it in terms of the Asian parental perspective. You know what I mean. He knows what I mean. That it has to be structured. It has to be in a certain way. So basically, right now, we need to sort of shift that and move towards the learning experience. The experience of learning itself online should be the way that we look into how the future might be. So rather than looking at it in terms of punitive sort of things like, if you haven't finished this, blah, 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 which you could do, yeah. But how do we then, as teachers, encourage that sort of participation within our online classes and looking at the structure as a freer structure rather than a constrictive one? So, and I guess the parents too need to have to believe that the teachers can do this for the future. That's all I would say.
Depends on countries. That's all I'm going to
say. Malaysia and Singapore, it's almost the same. It's like
yeah. Some places tend to mollycoddle parents more. Some places tend to give parents the independence. But I think it's really about giving parents the resources of how to engage with them. Whether it's more from a harder kind of Asian parents perspective, or from a less more hands-off kind of outcomes-based kind of approach, encouragement-based approach. It really depends, but having that central resource repository of best practices, and I think that would be very helpful, especially with this whole remote learning thing that we're all going through right now.
Yeah, understanding that there is actually a continuity within one end to the other end, and we sort of live from one end to the other end, and moving. It shifts depending on the types of that we we adopt.
And Mr. Koo, what's been your experiences of this, or what from all the settings that you work in?
Okay, I would say I was in order to student engagement is always the key outcome that most of the educators look at. How can we drive that? Because I talked to a lot of the universities, so basically how do they drive that within the environment? How do they I would say to build a much more collaborative learning environments within their ecosystem itself. I think in order to do that, I would say they need to integrate. I would say beside their collaborative platform, can be Team, can be any other platform or Zoom, whatever platform they're building on today, they're working on the student itself. It must be a platform that the student can communicate openly with the student to student, even student to lecturer standpoint. Basically, they can actually share the resources together to access the resource standpoint. And besides that also, we are talking about, I think, more of the student, I would say, the embedded some of the cognitive service like chatbot into the, I would say, the environment itself. Basically, student can ask questions on some of the things, not the chatbot actually can answer some of the questions that needed immediately, rather, because a lot of students they just like to have instant answer to some of the questions they're asking today. A lot of them today is mainly rely on things like, I talked to some of the university, they rely on WhatsApp to basically to wait for the lecturer to answer, which is not so much productive because a lot of the questions they're asking, maybe what they've learned in the classroom, all these things, basically is a repeat questions. If the chatbot can actually answer it and can actually analyze I would say, some of the students' shortcoming on these things that actually basically can engage the student better, that will help to drive a much more engaging learning within the environment itself. This continue to be some of the things that we are looking at as we digitize to much more digital environment. I would say environment much more digital. That is continue to be one of the things that will help students to learn better and to engage better.
Yeah, I do agree with Koo, especially at the higher education level, where it's more self-directed in a way. Students are, I guess, most of them are self-motivated in a way, to complete their courses and all. And really the focus is around empowerment, the way they go about with their self-learning journeys, right? So whether it is through collaboration tools, whether it's through productivity tools, whether it is through advanced research tools that we see out there. I think having that accessibility to those capabilities, those applications and softwares, those are definitely something that we do see, especially at the tertiary level.
Besides that, the student even I think student and student interaction and the lecture it become much more critical. It become very seamless. If besides that also they have actually a chatbot basically to support them, they'll be so much better. They can actually learn better. That means it's much more personalized and self-directed.
So anecdotally, many of my lecturer friends are a little annoyed when students keep WhatsApping them in the middle, like 2, 3 a.m. to say that, oh no, I have a submission tomorrow, I can't finish it. So I think where we are seeing in terms of our research in the healthcare space, and slowly that's coming into the education space, is what we call the digital front door, where you can actually start making certain I guess reservation slots to book time with your lecturers, and it's automated and synced up with their calendars or their time of availability and all that. Because at the end of the day, at higher education level, I mean, they do have to not only just focus on teaching, they have to do administration, they have to do research. There's so many different things that they have to juggle, right? And I think having that 24/7 accessibility to the students is one of the biggest issues, complaints, at least, and that I hear a lot in focus group discussions with them. So yeah, having that digital front door is quite interesting.
It's wonderful. Well, look, we're really running out of time, and I think you've all been so key with so interesting in what you've shared, and you've been very open, and I'm really thankful. We're just going to start to move into a demonstration from Lenovo about their new platforms. But if I may thank you all for your time today, and ask for a couple of closing comments as we wait for Panya just to join us. For me, it feels like collaboration. And in fact, there's a question we didn't quite get to about international collaboration from a school in the UK. So that feels like a really key part of what we've been discussing today.
Yeah. For me, it's really thinking about what's the next normal for student engagement. How do you keep your content interesting, fresh? How do you go about doing it through new technologies, whether it is using AI for personalization kind of services, whether it's using AR, VR, create this whole new experiential learning kind of purposes, or leveraging certain gamification kind of ways to go about engaging the student, keeping them interested in what they are learning. And this is very much more important at the K-12 levels, more than the tertiary level. So some very interesting things that we're seeing down here. And of course, at the end of the day, all these require digital skills.
Always.
Yeah.
Dr. Shukri and Mr. Koo, what would you like to say to close?
Right. To close, I think what we do at the ministry is basically constantly looking at the data, the trends, and also the analytics that go behind the scenes. For us, it's about emergence. What about looking at what does the data say about our learning online? So looking at that sort of levels to inform us in terms of the journey we're going to take. We of course we have a set of things that we've already planned, but along the way there are other interesting things that might crop up. So for us, it's always how can we do it better, and how can we add new content, applications, tools for digital learning for the future.
Thank you. And Mr. Koo, for you.
Okay. For me, I would say technology definitely going to change a lot on, I think, in the teaching environment. As you know, I think technology is not going to go away. For educators, I know a lot of them don't actually like technologies. I think it's something that's not going to go away. I think you need to be much more aware about it, to understand more about it, and to look at it, how can you leverage on it to improve the teaching and learning outcome you wanted with the environment. It's not going to take up a lot more of your screen time. I think if things like AI, it help you to improve. I would say to improve the, day-to-day job, to help you to maybe to improve, to understand the student better, so that you can spend more time with your student basically to improve their teaching and learning outcome. That's why.
Wonderful. Thank you so very much. And now I'm going to hand to Panya, who is going to share some solutions for empowering distance learning. And just bear with us as we change the screen over to him.
Yep.
Thank you.
Good afternoon.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Panya from Lenovo. I'm part of CAP Service Solution P-Sales. Let me start my slide. Yep. First of all, I would like to apologize because my home right now is very heavy rain and the network is unstable. So please bear with me. All right. Okay. Actually, since on last year, we do have a lot of requests from the market, include that regarding to COVID-19, and most of educators looking for a solution to support the student. So that we come up with a 6 scenario to cover all use cases. Okay. And before I go to by it scenario, and I would like to pointing off the customer pain point. Mostly will be audio issue and video issue, include that how they can share the sourcing from tablet or whiteboard. Include that, how can get more attention from the student. And of course, some of the educators would like to have enhancement of the production, such as picture-in-picture feature. The thing that I using right now, you can see my background. You can see text sticker on running on in front of me. So this all the thing is a request from the market. Okay, and to improve for the teacher to get the best online training, I would like to give you some idea that first of all, you need to have the private area and pop lighting set up, and use the right equipment. Include that you might consider to use a high resolution camera and dedicated microphone and speaker. And of course, it's a measure of impact for your online training is the internet bandwidth speed. Okay, and you might consider to use the right tool for your teaching. All right, this is my home environment. I use this for the online presenting to my customer every day. And you can see here, I have the key light, I have the fill light here, I have the backlight, I have decoration background. Sometimes I have green screen, and I do have the high resolution of the camera. This is the DSLR, and I also use the ThinkSmart 500. This is our product. It's ready for use for the conference, and I have a presentation on notebook. I have the tablet. Maybe I want to use the handwriting, and I have headset for in case that I want to do a private presentation. Okay, this is green screen. Okay, the first one is quite straightforward. I believe that everyone uses it even now. Only one notebook to improve the quality of the video and audio. You might consider to use a dedicated camera or headset. Okay, this is a cheapest method, and most of everyone use it. Okay, the next scenario, we consider to use the dedicated video conference kit. You can see in the picture is ThinkSmart 500, and running on the Microsoft Teams room and the Zoom room. So that this is an entry level for online instruction, and very easy for the teacher. When the teacher create a schedule, they can just one click and start right away. Okay, and also support multiple display, and you can share your presentation pass through to the Hub 500 without connect to the internet. Okay, you will get better sound and quality of the video because they use the high-end web camera. All right, this is give you some idea that if you have multiple classroom and you want to make it online, we can connect it something like this. Okay, it's same thing on the Zoom platform. And this is a give you example during our site reference named the Seoul University. We help them to design online classroom, and you can see the educator or teacher can do the online training. All right, and the next scenario is like we make it compact set for the professional trainer who would like to get all this equipment to their home or their university. And this gives you some idea that we can provide of the ready for use and support the whiteboard camera, so that I will demonstrate, show you later. Okay, the next scenario will be covered on the lecture hall, and by this classroom, we bring on the auto tracking camera with the digital whiteboard and support on a hybrid classroom, hidden classroom, or even like lecture halls. You can see for the lecture hall, it might consider to install the ceiling speaker because some of students may join the class and some of them will join from home. Okay, And this is quite technical, but give you some idea that all the component that you can see here is actually can install and give you the actual photo here. Okay, this is another example that for Sonic University, and you can see that we have the two big screen on the middle of room, and include the speaker and things you might find it, and include the absent touchscreen projector, allow the educator can share handwriting or share presentation at the same time. Okay. The next scenario will be the one that I'm using right now. This is a green screen and use the production software. You can see that we use technique for support who want to have a virtual classroom and virtual environment, include that sharing multiple content source, also published to the social networks. Okay. This is some of diagram that I can show you, but actually they have the 4 zone. The first one with the training zone include the green screen and the high resolution camera, and video capture to the production PC, and pass to the internet zone and to the audience or participant. Okay. All right. This is another example of virtual instruction that we have been training to the teacher. Okay, this is another example of another project. It's an upcountry university, and they use the mix up with the virtual instruction and online classroom. All right, the last scenario we adopted from the one of our hospitals in northern area, and during COVID-19. Doctor and nurse would like to have the mobile video conference, which is the allow them to move from room to another room easy and just plug and play. Okay, this is all the component for this, and we apply this set for the educator. Okay, this is our showroom here, and some of the educator uses type of the movable connect to the Samsung Flip. Okay, so let me start the live demo right now, and I will stop sharing my screen. And could you please maximize my video, and you can see more clearly what I'm doing right now. All right, and I like to show you here. Okay, this is a video from the student Dusit University using the virtual instruction for online training. Okay, and okay, the first things I would like to emphasize. Let me go back to the quality of the camera, so that I would like to check my camera from DSLR to just another web camera, so that you can see the resolution is not clear and it's not sharp. When I go back to the base one, you can see I can get better resolution and lighting. All right. Okay. So when I turn off the light and I turn on the light, so that you can comparison that is a really impact to resolution of the camera itself. And if I want to show you what I have right now, So this is the thing someone have 500 connect to the two screen here. And I have appointment to teaching my student here. And I have tablet here. I have the scene switcher here so that I can change any screen what I want. All right, this is very useful. And if I want to, okay, another tip for the better resolution so that you can see before and after when you change the better camera and you have proper light setting and eye level angle for the camera. This is another example that we can use the Microsoft Team Room for your classroom. This is a teaching for. You just create the team based on the subjects and create the schedule, and you connect to your notebook to the thing 500 and click join. Next slide, we will give you some of screenshot when I have the student on my team based on subject basic science for kids. Okay, whenever that I have the schedule to teaching, I just click on the calendar or just start a meeting right away. So when you want to booking your classroom A1 or 2, you just put on the name on that. Okay, after you put on name on that, it will automatically to show up on the thing someone have find that. Whenever that you click join, and it's automatic right away. And whenever that I want to sharing my whiteboard, okay, I just click content camera on the right corner on the right icon. Okay, let me show you here. Yep. See that by the intelligent. Let me show you again. You see that on the green border, it will be automatic capture the whiteboard. And whenever that I want to write anything here, the camera will be captured and the render on the another layer, so that this is a key that your student can see whatever that you're writing on the whiteboard. Okay, and without blocking anything, and get better resolution when you want to choose mathematics or drawing or whatever. All right. So let me share my screen. What software that I use here. Maybe you can imagine that we can have hopefully you can see my screen. Okay. This is a software that I use for the picture-in-picture. All right. So if I want to change like this, I can do it. Okay. Or even like this. Yep. So go back to my slide. Okay. This is already demo for you. Okay. And already demo for you for the picture-in-picture feature. So this is a main component for virtual instruction. You can choose Remix software or choose the open source like OBS. And the camera, you can select DSLR or just high resolution webcam. And the green screen and lighting, you definitely need it. And studio PC, you consider to get the high performance of that. And the display, they have two kind display. One is the production screen, and the other one is live screen, so that you can see what's going on. And the other one is audio set, include the mic and speaker. And switcher and crafter will be help you to get multiple sourcing to combine to your software. And the last one, this is how to I join the conference by using of the live screen, so that we use the NDI technology and link to the video conference platforms such as Microsoft Teams, Zoom, Google, whatever that support the web camera, so that we can broadcast the live studio screen to everyone. All right. Okay. That's it for my live demo. Hopefully, you give you some idea that we can use the kind of this technology to get more student engagement or get more attention for teaching. Right. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Panya. That is, it's really interesting. I can see how flexible it is and how you can apply it to different settings. At this stage, I think what I'd like to do is to thank you so much to everybody for participating. Actually, Panya, I don't know if you can hear me. There's a question that's come through asking about if you can give some more information about virtual instruction. I think we're struggling with connectivity here. I think what I'd like to do is thank you so much. If you have more questions for this for the live demo, then please do email us, and we'll be able to put those questions to Lenovo, and they'll be able to answer you directly. Mr. Koo, hi. Actually, do you are you able to give some more information about the virtual instruction?
What type of virtual? I need to be much more specific on the virtual instructions.
It's just a question from Nada Ibrahim that's come through. I think it's a little more specific about the question about the demonstration. So I think perhaps, Nada, I'm going to connect you separately to. Okay, perfect. So Nada Ibrahim, we're going to connect you separately for that. So thank you so much to everybody for your participation today, for all the interesting questions and for the insights that we've had into both the platform and just where we're all going. Interesting times, and I look forward to speaking with you all again as we move forward to see how things develop. So with that, I'm going to close today's session. And I wish you all a happy day, a happy evening, and I look forward to working and speaking with you again very soon. So thank you very much, and goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.